It happened a few weeks ago. I was back on my night shift at the hospital after a brief break. It felt normal at first. I walked to my station and checked patient charts, but something was off. The charts were all rearranged. I thought I must have forgotten to put them back in order. Still, a knot formed in my stomach as I tried to shake off the feeling. Around midnight, I heard it. A faint sobbing sound coming from room 205. I went to check, but the room was empty. I felt a chill run down my spine. I told myself it was just my tired mind playing tricks. My heart raced, but I forced myself to keep working. The next night, things got worse. I was getting supplies when I noticed a shadow move quickly down the hallway. I blinked, and it was gone. I called out, "Hello?" But only silence answered back. Surely my mind was just tired, I thought. But still, the feeling stuck with me. Later that night, I took a break in the nurse's lounge. I could hear children's laughter coming from the playroom. My stomach dropped because it was after 2 a.m. and there were no kids in the hospital. I stood up and went to the playroom, but when I got there it was dark and empty. I felt cold and confused. Where had the laughter come from? Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I went to make my rounds. I reached the end of the hallway when I saw a figure, no, a shadow, standing near the window of a room. I froze. I asked, "Is anyone there?" It felt so real, but I took a step forward, and just like that, it vanished. My heart was pounding, and sweat dripped from my brow. I didn't know what to do. By the time my shift ended, I was completely drained and terrified. As I clocked out, that soft sobbing echoed in my mind. I stepped outside into the fresh air, but the feeling of being trapped lingered. I wasn't sure what I had experienced. Were they real, or just dreams made by my tired mind? Some questions refused to go away. Weeks have gone by, but I still think about it all the time. What happened in that hospital? What did I encounter during those long, sleepless hours? I wish I could put it behind me, but I can't. Now, each time I go back to work, I wonder if it will happen again. I feel like something is still lingering in those walls. It haunts me. I try to focus on my patients, but my mind always drifts back to that night. The laughter, the sobs, the shadows. I can't shake the feeling that something is waiting for me in the dark. I was back at work again, and the familiar knot tightened in my stomach. It was a Friday night, the beginning of a long weekend for most, but for me, it was just another night shift. As I walked through the dimly lit hallway, I felt the weight of the past few weeks pressing down on me. Each step was heavier than the last. I took a breath and collected myself. I needed to focus. My first round went smoothly, or so I thought. Patients were sleeping, and the hum of the machines provided a sense of normalcy, but the feeling of unease crept back. Just as I was about to enter room 205, I paused. I still felt that chilling connection to the sobs I had heard. I shook it off and moved to the next room, but as I turned to leave, I heard it again. A soft, heart-wrenching sobbing. This time it was louder. I couldn't ignore it. I took a step back and opened the door. Empty. Just like last time. I searched the room, half expecting to find someone hiding in the shadows, but nothing was there. Feeling anxious, I moved on. I decided to skip the nurse's lounge this time, wary of the laughter I had heard before. Instead, I grabbed some supplies and made my way down the long hallway toward the playroom. As I turned the corner, I noticed a flickering light coming from a room at the far end. I hesitated. It was too late for anyone to be in there. I approached cautiously, feeling the cold air wash over me. The light flickered again, casting strange shapes on the walls. My heart raced, but I felt compelled to investigate. Just as I reached for the door, I heard the laughter again, soft, childlike, and echoing down the corridor. Confusion mixed with dread, and I stumbled back, ready to turn away. But then something caught my eye. A small, colorful drawing stuck to the glass of the door. I leaned closer. It was a crayon drawing of a happy sun with stick figures holding hands beneath it. Beneath the drawing, A name scrawled in uneven letters. Maggie. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't recognize the name, but something about it felt wrong. I turned quickly and retraced my steps, wanting to distance myself from whatever had just happened. But then, as I got further away, I heard the sobbing again, more distressed this time, mixed with the laughter. I glanced back, and for just a moment, I thought I saw a small figure peeking around the corner of the playroom. It was gone before I could process it. I took a few shaky steps back until I nearly collided with the wall. My heart thudded heavily, each beat echoing in my ears. I needed answers. I couldn't just ignore it anymore. As my shift dragged on, I thought about Maggie and why her name felt so integral to everything that had happened. Was she a patient? Did she belong to a family connected to this building? I had to find out. Then, as I prepared for my next round, the lights flickered and everything went dark. The darkness was thick, almost suffocating. My hand instinctively reached for the wall, the cool surface grounding me as I tried to orient myself. I could hear my breath echoing in the solitude, steady but quickening. I fumbled for my phone, the screen illuminating just enough to cast shadows that danced along the walls. I needed to find the emergency button. The flickering lights were one thing, but this, total blackness, was unsettling. I pivoted, searching for the nearest door. As my fingers brushed against the cold metal handle, a muffled sound broke through the stillness. A child's laughter, soft and sweet, but laced with an eerie undercurrent. It was coming from the playroom again. I took a deep breath. The laughter faded into a snicker, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Hadn't I just passed that room? I felt pulled back toward it, curiosity warring with instinct. Each step felt like walking through molasses. When I arrived at the door, I could see the faintest outline of the crayon drawing still stuck to the glass, illuminated by my phone. With trepidation, I pushed the door open. The hinges creaked softly, and the room was just as I left it, empty but for chairs and toys scattered across the floor. The lights had not returned, but something felt different. I could feel it in my gut. That was when I noticed the drawings. They were everywhere, filling the walls with vibrant colors, happy suns, trees, animals, and smiling faces. But as I studied them, I noticed something odd. They weren't just random. Each seemed to tell a story, including one that grabbed my attention. It was a picture of a girl, the same uneven handwriting beneath it. Maggie, it read, but this time the image was different. She was holding hands with another small figure, a shadowy depiction, long fingers outstretched, and a gaping smile. I pulled back. The image made my stomach turn. Just then, the power flickered back to life, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. I blinked against the stark brightness, my heart racing. I looked around, anchored by the now familiar feeling of dread that had settled in my chest. That's when I heard it again. The sobbing, sharper and more desperate than I had ever heard before. Panic surged through me. Someone was in the room, somewhere hiding, and I could barely see through the glowing haze of the fluorescent lights. "Hello?" I called out, my voice wavering. Silence hung thick in the air for a moment before it was broken by soft words. "I want to go home." I backed up, nearly tripping over a toy truck. "Where are you?" But there was no reply, only that wretched sound piercing through the stillness. Just as I was about to turn and flee, something brushed against my leg. A fleeting touch, warm as if alive. I froze, breath caught in my throat. Then, in the corner of my eye, something shifted in the shadows by the door. I stepped back, ready to run, but before I could act, the light flickered again. Everything was thrown into darkness as the sobbing crescendoed around me. I barely held it together as I moved instinctively toward the exit, desperate for the safety of the corridor. I had to leave this place, but before I could push the door open, I turned back for one last look, and that was when I saw it. Maggie. Standing in the pitch black, Her small frame just an outline against the door, tears streaming down her face, pleading with me to stay. My heart dropped. I stood frozen, staring at Maggie. Her outline blurred against the faint light, and my heart thundered in my chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. I should have felt relief at seeing her, not dread. "Maggie," I whispered, but my voice barely carried in the stillness. I took a hesitant step forward. She didn't move, just continued to stand there, a blurry silhouette of innocence mixed with something dark and unrecognizable. "Maggie, are you okay?" I tried again. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I felt like I was in a trance, tethered to her by a thread of concern, despite the fear gripping me. "Maggie!" This time I raised my voice, desperate. Suddenly, the lights pulsed back on, and her expression flashed through the brightness. I saw her eyes wide and fearful, but it was her mouth, the way it twisted into a frown, that caught my attention. It felt like a warning. And then she spoke again, softer this time. "I don't want to play anymore." My gut twisted. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, the room shifted. The air thickened, and I felt like a weight pressed down on my chest. The toys scattered across the floor suddenly seemed to tremble, the shadows stretching longer as if alive. I glanced at the door, and panic surged again. "Stay!" she cried, louder now. Her voice echoed with an authority that felt wrong coming from her tiny frame. But I could feel something lurking in the corners, a darkness beckoning. I shook my head, breaking the spell. "I can't. I have to." Just as I turned to flee, the door slammed shut. The sound reverberated through my bones, and I jolted back, eyes wide with horror. I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. "Maggie, let me out!" I called frantically, my hands pounding on the door. But my cries were met with silence, a void filled only by the terrible sobs that continued to echo through the room. "Please!" I gasped, spinning around to face her again. But she was gone. In her place were the crayon drawings, now seeming twisted and sinister, the once joyful colors morphing into dark hues that clawed at my sanity. The shadows danced along the walls, and I felt as if the room were closing in on me, just like the darkness had before. A noise caught my attention, a thud from the corner. I turned, heart racing, and caught a glimpse of something moving. My eyes widened. Footsteps? They were soft, like those of a child, but filled with an unnatural heaviness. I backed away, slipping on a toy as I scooted across the floor. The sobbing had stopped, replaced by an unsettling giggle. It echoed all around me, moving closer. Everything shifted again. A breeze cut through the room, bringing with it a scent of something rotten, and my stomach rolled. I couldn't breathe. "What do you want?" I shouted, the panic rising in my throat. Another laugh sounded, this time mocking. And then a whisper, barely audible, floated through the air. "Stay with us forever." The darkness answered, curling around me like a shroud. I felt the urge to cry out one last time, but all I could do was run. I lunged at the door, pulling on the handle with all my strength, but it remained locked. As my eyes frantically scanned the room, I understood. I had to confront whatever was in here with me. Then, just above the whispers, I heard her voice again, louder this time and more desperate than ever. "Help me!" My heart hammered as the room began to spin. That's when I realized I wasn't alone in this fight. I had to find Maggie. In the center of the room, I saw a flicker of movement. I took a cautious step closer, unsure if I was imagining things. The shadows seemed to ripple, and I squinted, trying to focus. "Maggie!" I called again, my voice barely more than a whisper, filled with dread. But I was met with silence, the kind that felt thick and smothering. Maybe there was still hope. Suddenly, I noticed a dark figure crouched low against the wall. My breath caught. It was small, childlike. "Maggie?" I whispered again, my heart pounding. But as I approached, I felt a wave of dread wash over me. The figure didn't look quite right. "Maggie!" I shouted, louder this time, an edge of panic creeping in. The figure jerked its head up, and the light caught a flash of eyes that seemed far too old for such a small face. "Are you here to play?" it asked in a sing-song voice that sent chills crawling up my spine. This wasn't Maggie. The voice was too twisted, too delighted by something dark. I stumbled back, shaking my head. "No, you're not Maggie." A laugh echoed through the room, high-pitched and hysterical. "No, not her. But you could still stay." The shadows thickened, closing in around me. I spun around, seeking any escape, desperate to find the door, but the walls felt like they were shifting, moving toward me, like they wanted to swallow me whole. I had to think. I focused hard, recalling the last thing I'd seen before the darkness had settled. Maggie. She needed help. But was this thing connected to her? "Maggie!" I cried once more, my voice breaking. "I'm here! I'm coming for you!" In response, the shadows pulsed, and the room shifted again, somehow widening. I caught a glimpse of crayon drawings on the walls, those same cheerful stick figures, but the expressions morphed into twisted grins that sent a wave of nausea washing over me. "Help her?" the creature mocked, its voice dripping with malice. "You won't find her. She's ours now." "No!" I yelled, my own fear transforming into anger. I would not let this thing win. "You don't own her!" With my determination fueling me, I lunged toward the darkness. I had to fight, to save Maggie, to do anything but cower in a corner pretending this wasn't happening. Just then, everything went black. My body tensed. The sensation of falling gripped me tightly. I hit the ground hard, but there was no pain, only the cold surrounding me. Was I in darkness again? I scrambled to my feet and felt around, my hands brushing against something soft and solid. I turned to see a faint glow ahead of me. It flickered like a candle's flame, and from it I could hear Maggie's voice again, faint but clear. "Help me!" But this time, it wasn't just a plea. It carried an urgency that made my blood run cold. I followed the light. I had to get to her. As I moved closer, the darkness receded like a tide, and I started running. I knew I had to reach her before it was too late. The shadows clawed at my feet, trying to pull me back, but I couldn't stop now. Then, just as I reached the edge of the light, the air around me twisted again. A figure stepped into the glow, a familiar face that made my stomach drop. "Maggie!" But it wasn't her. I suddenly realized this was just the beginning. The figure loomed before me, its features flickering like an old film. Familiar and yet grotesque, it wore Maggie's face, but the eyes held something dark, something cold. The figure smiled, but it wasn't her smile. "You've come to find me," it said, voice dripping with insincerity. "No, you're not her!" I shouted, stumbling back. The light flickered, and I felt the shadows start to close in again, hungry for my fear. "Where is Maggie? What have you done with her?" It tilted its head, as if considering my question. "She's playing with us now. She doesn't want to leave." The words twisted my stomach into knots. "You're lying." "Am I?" The figure laughed again, the sound echoing unnaturally. My heart raced as I wrestled with the horror of what it might mean. I needed to stay calm, to think past the panic. I turned my back on it, pressing forward toward the fading light. I felt the weight of the darkness trying to cling to me, but I fought it off. I had to believe Maggie was still out there somewhere. If I could just reach the light, I could find her. I ran, ignoring the figure's snickers that followed me, piercing through the air like shards of glass. "You can't hide from the truth," it called. "She was meant for this place." My skin crawled as the creature's laughter bounced around me. Suddenly, I was in a long hallway, lined with doors that felt like sentinels watching my every move. The light flickered and pulsed, guiding me toward the end of the corridor. I hesitated, glancing back to see if the figure was still following. There was nothing but darkness, wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. "Turn back!" the voice echoed again, taunting me. "Stay with us!" But I wouldn't. I pushed myself forward, dread and determination coursing through me in equal measure. As I reached the last door, I felt a rush of heat. Something was happening on the other side. "Maggie!" I called, but my voice came out shaky. I pressed my ear against the door and heard whispers, muffled sounds that cut through the thick tension in the air. They grew louder, twisting into laughter. My stomach turned. I yanked the door open and stumbled into the room. It was bright, almost blinding. What I saw burned itself into my mind. A circle of children surrounded something on the ground. Their faces were obscured by shadows, but the joy in their voices was chilling. They chanted Maggie's name over and over, encouraging her, it seemed. I felt sick. In the center of the circle, I saw a small shape slowly rising. It was Maggie, but she looked different. Her smile wide and unnatural, eyes sparkling with something eerie. Was she truly happy, or was something more sinister at play? Before I could call out, the children turned toward me, their smiles fading into blank stares. "You shouldn't have come," one said, his voice low and ominous. I froze, the weight of dread crashing down on me. Just then, Maggie lifted her head, and for a heartbeat she looked like the little girl I knew. But that looked faded, replaced by something darker that sent terror skittering through me. "Join us," she whispered, her voice sweet but layered with something deeper. That's when I understood. It wasn't just a game. The shadows were coming for me again, and I didn't have much time left. With my heart pounding, I turned to run, but the laughter of the children grew louder, the chill of their presence closing in. I needed to escape, to find a way out before it was too late. But the darkness was alive, shifting and grasping, and I was no longer certain which way was safe. Then everything went cold. The laughter faded, replaced by the sound of heavy breathing. I wasn't alone anymore. I spun around, searching for the source of the heavy breathing. My heart raced, thrumming like a war drum in my chest. The air felt thicker, almost sticky, clinging to my skin as I took a hesitant step back. The room dimmed, shadows creeping in from the edges, and the children's vacant expressions now seemed to merge into one terrifying form. "Maggie?" I croaked out, my voice barely a whisper. Hope flickered inside me, but it felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. I scanned the room, looking for her familiar face, but the brightness of the circle seemed to draw my attention away from the horror. The heavy breathing intensified, and I spotted movement out of the corner of my eye. A shape lunged forward from the darkness, lunging into the light, revealing a grinning figure that didn't belong. It was one of the children, but his smile stretched too wide, teeth sharp and glistening. "You want her?" he hissed, punctuating his words with a deep, guttural laugh that echoed around the room. I stumbled back, stepping into the circle of light that felt like a barrier between worlds. What was I doing here? I had to stay focused, but the words seemed to escape me as terror enveloped my thoughts. Then, with a sudden wrenching sensation in my gut, I felt the pull of darkness again, as if the shadows were alive, reaching out for me. I had to break away, to get out before they dragged me in. "Get away from her!" I screamed, hoping to pierce through the veil of horror surrounding me. I lunged forward, desperate to reach Maggie, but her eyes reflected something different now, an emptiness. "Stay with us!" another child echoed, and their voices began to merge, forming a chorus that rattled my bones. The air plummeted in temperature, and with it came the rush of shadowy limbs racing toward me. I could feel their chill against my skin, and it was no longer just a feeling of fear. It was cold dread settling within me. In a burst of adrenaline, I dashed to the side, barely dodging an outstretched hand. My eyes darted around for an escape. The doorway was within reach, but something was blocking my mind from seeing it clearly as the children's chanting swelled around me, tightening like a vice. "Maggie!" I cried again, needs spilling from my lips. I refused to give up on her. Just as I turned, an awful realization hit me. The children weren't just chanting her name, they were chanting for me to join them. I pushed forward, aligning my focus on the farthest edge of the circle. And then, just as I was about to break free, a searing pain shot through my arm as one of the children grabbed me, their fingers cold as ice. "Join us!" they howled, the echo reverberating in my skull. Panic surged, and I thrashed against them, desperate to break free. I could feel the darkness closing in, but there was no time to waste on despair. With one final push, I tore myself away and sprinted towards the door, my pulse thumping in my ears. I reached for the handle, and that's when I saw it. The floor beneath me began to crack, fissures spidering outward toward the children, into the heart of their circle. I hesitated, fear taking hold again. Would I ever get out? Would Maggie be left behind in this nightmare? Before I could think any further, the room shook violently and the light flickered again. Suddenly, the laughter erupted into screams, piercing through the air. I shoved the door open and bolted into the hallway, but the looming darkness had a grip on me that was merciless. I could still hear the echoes of their calls, laughter mingled with the sound of crumbling walls, drawing me back into the chaos. I ran, not realizing until I was outside that I had just opened a door into a world I never knew existed. But I had to find Maggie. I had to confront whatever this was, whatever had taken root in the shadows. And I couldn't do it alone. Yet I felt it, the weight of something watching me from the darkness of the hallway. And that chilling sensation told me I wasn't safe yet. I stumbled into the dimly lit hallway, gasping for breath. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest, and shadows clung to the corners like secrets waiting to be uncovered. Every instinct in me screamed to run, yet my legs felt rooted to the ground. What had just happened back there? I gripped the wall for support, trying to steady my pounding heart. I had to keep moving. I needed to find Maggie. The thought of her trapped in that room, surrounded by those children, sent a wave of nausea through me. I turned sharply, looking for a set of stairs or an exit. While panic gnawed at my insides, I stumbled forward. Each step echoed, a reminder that the silence could be more terrifying than the screams from before. Then, I heard it. Soft whispers slithering down the hallway, brushing against my skin. My heart raced faster. The voices were familiar, yet wrong, like echoes of what I had just heard. "Stay with us," they seemed to call. Fear twisted my stomach, and I ran into the nearest room, slamming the door behind me. The room was small, cluttered with old furniture and medical supplies. A single light flickered above, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. I felt trapped, but there was no time to panic. I had to gather my thoughts. I crept toward the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the outside world, but layers of grime obscured it. Instead, I could see my own reflection, eyes wide with desperation and confusion. Think, I whispered to myself. I needed a plan. I could still hear the echoes of laughter echoing in my mind. It was like a twisted lullaby urging me to succumb to their darkness. I shook my head, trying to dispel the haunting images of Maggie's empty eyes, the children's grinning faces. They wanted me to join them. My gaze darted back to the door. I couldn't stay here. But where could I go? I had to confront this evil. Taking a deep breath, I made my way to the door again. I turned the handle slowly, peering through the crack. The hallway was empty, but the air still felt charged. Then everything shifted. A loud crash echoed from the direction I had just fled. The sound of splintering wood and muffled cries sent a shiver down my spine. I opened the door wider, filled with a sense of dread. Someone, or something, was in panic mode. "Come out! Come out!" a sing-song voice taunted from further down the hall. It was one of the kids, their voice dripping with mockery. A chill swept over me. No, I wouldn't let them play with me anymore. I slipped back into the room, heart racing. I needed to hold on to something real, something to ground me. I spotted an old flashlight on a dusty shelf. It flickered to life with a weak beam. Better than nothing. With the flashlight in hand, I carefully opened the door again. The hallway was still, but a thick fog slithered along the ground, creeping toward me like a living entity. I remembered the fear I felt before, my gut instinct telling me to avoid that darkness at all costs. "Run," I whispered, urgent and trembling. As I stepped into the hallway, I knew I had to confront whatever it was that lurked in the shadows, both for me and for Maggie. But when I turned to flee down the hall, I caught sight of something that made my blood freeze. Standing at the end of the corridor, two glowing eyes watched me, unblinking and hungry. That's when everything went silent. The air stilled, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I stood frozen, my body refusing to move as those eyes pierced through the fog. They felt like lasers, burning into me, weighing me down. The flashlight in my hand flickered, casting erratic beams against the walls, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. Each heartbeat stretched time, making the hallway feel like a tunnel of endless dread. Then, the sound came, a low growl, like thunder rumbling in the distance. It echoed through the corridor, reverberating in my bones. Panic surged, and I whipped around, ready to sprint back into the safety of the room. But before I could take a step, a soft thud, followed by a whisper, stopped me in my tracks. "Don't go. Stay with us forever," it cooed, the voice reminiscent of the children's laughter I had heard before, morphed into something sinister. The hairs on my arms stood up. I gripped the flashlight harder, its flickering beam the only thing keeping me grounded. "Not real. Not real," I muttered, forcing myself to focus. I had to move. If I didn't act now, I might never get the chance. Deep breath. One step, then another. I glanced back, and to my horror, the glowing eyes had moved closer, inching forward, blending with the shadows. I turned and bolted, racing down the hallway, adrenaline pumping through me. My footfalls were loud, thundering against the floor, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence around me. Suddenly, I spotted a door on my right, an emergency exit. Hope surged just as I reached for the handle. It was locked. My heart sank. I slammed my shoulder against it, but I could feel it give nothing. Another thud reverberated down the hall, that growl rising to a din that echoed in chorus with my rising panic. "Please! Please!" I yelled, desperate and breathless. I spun back to the left, searching for another way out. That was when I noticed it, a faint light flickering at the far end of the corridor, so far away yet inviting. "Maybe," I breathed, biting down on my fear. With renewed determination, I rushed toward the light. Each step felt like I was racing against time, as if whatever stalked me was gaining ground. I didn't dare look back. I felt it, a presence. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts. "Join us! Join us!" What did they want from me? Did they want me to give in? My mind reeled. I reached the light, and relief washed over me as I found the door ajar. I slipped through, landing in a small room filled with medical equipment. A soft hum filled the air, a stark contrast to the chaos behind me. It wasn't until I turned around that I saw it. Strung across the ceiling was a series of old photographs, each one depicting a child, smiling but hollow, eyes reflecting a gleam eerily similar to what I'd seen before. My breath caught in my throat. I stumbled back, horrified. "What is this?" I rasped. That's when I saw it, a reflection in the glass of a cabinet. A shadow loomed behind me. My heart dropped. I was not alone in this room. I whipped around, and there it stood, a child, eyes glowing, mouth twisted into a grin that made the blood run cold in my veins. "No!" I screamed, but it was too late. I shot back, slamming into the wall behind me. The figure lunged forward, a blur of darkness and glee, eyes brighter than anything I had ever seen. "Play with us!" it shrieked, the laughter spilling out harsh and twisted. In a moment of raw terror, all thoughts of logic faded. I had to escape. Whatever this was, it craved my fear like a lifeblood. I darted past the child, heart pounding, my mind racing with fragments of all that had transpired. The room around me felt alive, shadows reeling in pursuit. I flung doors open, images of previous torment nearly overwhelming me. I couldn't let them pull me back. They were dragging me closer to some hidden truth I wasn't ready to face. As I reached another door, the echoes of laughter converged, assaulting my senses. "She's here!" they wailed, voices melding into a chorus of nightmarish delight. My stomach twisted, but I pressed forward, feeling the rush of something ancient and dark gripping the back of my collar as I breached the threshold of another room. This one was smaller, cluttered with bits of forgotten medical equipment, dust swirling in the static air. A single overhead light flickered, and I could see what it illuminated: a faded mural along one wall, bright colors dulled with time and grime. Beneath it were crayon drawings, some of the familiar cheerful stick figures I'd seen before. But beneath their smiles, others lay shrouded in shadows, eyes wide with terror. "Maggie," I whispered, caught off guard. One figure caught my eye. A small girl digging her heels into the earth, clutching a sun painted over her head. "Maggie." The drawing spoke volumes of fear now. It was no longer just playful, it was desperate. "Help!" It was my voice echoing from somewhere deep within the shadows of the room, bouncing back as if taunting me. I remembered the childlike laughter, and instantly a chill slithered down my spine. Whatever these figures represented, they were not just memories. They were the trapped souls of children, caught in an otherworldly snare. The door slammed shut with a thunderous clap. I spun, heart racing. "No, open!" I cried, yanking at the latch. The shadows writhed against the walls that felt closer, more alive. It was no longer a physical threat, but something primal feeding on my terror. I looked back at the wall. The crayon drawings shimmered, and I saw one in particular: Maggie, her pleas woven into the colors of the art. I had to create something, disrupt the harmony in the chaos. Grabbing a loose marker off a nearby table, I hurriedly scribbled alongside her picture. "Help!" I added beneath her name, urging her through the darkness. A low growl resonated, shaking the foundation of the room. "You can't escape," the voice taunted from behind me, thick with malice. I felt like I was losing my sense of self, like the room was trying to consume me. Just then I recalled the flickering light. It seemed less chaotic now, a small beacon in the dark. "Maggie, I'm coming," I called out, hands trembling as I pressed against the wall, trying to find purchase among the fading art. There was a soft sigh, the kind you give when burdened. But this wasn't just the dim of despair. It was a signal, a tether to something greater than I understood. I turned back to the door, ramming against it with both shoulders, heart screaming against the shadows still flitting around me. I felt the warmth of light, steady, challenging the darkness, suffocating the space. I lunged again, and the door rattled but held fast. "I won't let you take her," I promised, willing anger to fuel my strength. But everything fell silent, the air heavy and thick like a stifling blanket. An eerie calm settled, and I hesitated. What if I had crossed too far? "Stay," the whisper drifted, cascading through the air like smoke. I took a deep breath and smashed my body into the door one last time. And this time, it cracked open, spilling me out into the hallway. I barely had a moment to gather myself before I bolted again, fleeing the remnants of that room, letting instinct guide me. I tore down the corridor, a blurry figure hanging to the fringes of my peripheral vision. Maggie's outline again, the soft cries fading into a mere whisper of hope. "Help me!" Bursting through another set of double doors, I fell onto the main floor, gasping and panting. The hospital had become a labyrinth, time and space bending within its walls. "Help me, Maggie!" I called out, feeling the strength of some force urging me to continue my search for her. Looking through the fog of uncertainty, I caught sight of her again, just beyond a set of heavy doors that seemed to glow with light. Maggie! I pushed the doors open. Light flooded my senses, and the shadows recoiled. Inside, it was brighter than I had ever known, blinding yet warm. I staggered forward, searching, praying to see her. I had nearly made it back. Would she be waiting for me? I stepped forward to the center of the room, sunlight pouring through the tall windows. But Maggie wasn't there. The shadows loomed at the edges, swirling, waiting again, lost in a war more significant than I had ever imagined. I turned around, facing the encroaching darkness, ready to fight whatever would come next. I wouldn't abandon her again. But as the shadows danced around me, I couldn't help but wonder, was Maggie still even there? Or had the darkness already taken her from me? The uncertainty swirled in my mind as the light flickered, and I prepared to confront whatever bizarre reality awaited me. The echoes of laughter, still lingering, reminded me I was not alone in my fight. But with each step forward, shadows loomed larger still.